Hello, everybody. Get out your note packet and turn to page 6. If you don't have the note packet out yet, pause this video and go get it. The blue packet, the one we've been working on for a while now, and turn to page 6. So last time we talked about bacteria, we talked about viruses and bacteria, and we're going to work through the different kingdoms of living organisms. So we're going to keep getting more and more complicated as we go through. Bacteria weren't that exciting. They were one cell. They had a nucleus, or they didn't have a nucleus. They had cytoplasm. They had some DNA, but they could cause some bad things to happen. You can get strep throat. You can get all sorts of different bacterial infections. Now we're going to talk about a kingdom that wasn't even known for a while. This is kingdom Protista. The reason that it wasn't known is because it's microscopic and most of them are in the water. So until we got a microscope strong enough to actually see them, nobody even knew they were there. So in the days of like Aristotle, he didn't have a microscope strong enough, so he didn't realize this kingdom was there. So here are some examples of protists. You've probably not seen these before unless you've already done the homework, since I'm behind on getting this lecture up today. But they've got some cool shapes. They've got all sorts of neat shapes. Some kind of look more like bacteria, but they're definitely bigger. Some have spikes. Some have these zigzags. This is Spirogyra, which is a type of algae. And they're broken up into two groups. So I want you to put on the first line under characteristics of protists, I want you to write that they are microscopic. That's the first line. They're unicellular or multicellular. So bacteria couldn't become multicellular. They were only unicellular. So now we see a change there. They actually can have more than one cell. Like if you look at that Spirogyra there. They are unicellular or multicellular. They are autotrophic or heterotrophic. Remember what that means? Autotrophic means they can make their own food like the Spirogyra. They're kind of more plant-like. And then heterotrophic would be the other two. They're more animal-like and they have to eat others. And finally, they're eukaryotic. Tell me you remember this word, please. Eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. So did you get all that written down? The first line should be they are microscopic. The last line should be have a nucleus. So they were broken up into two groups, the protozoans, which are the animal-like protists, and then we will have the algae, which are the plant-like protists. The animal-like protists are non-photosynthetic. They don't have a cell wall, which is weird because all the rest of the protists do, and the bacteria. And we're going to classify them based upon their movement. So each of them moves in slightly a different way. There are actually thousands of different protists. Or protozoans, we're just going to look at 4. The first one is the amoeba. The amoeba kind of looks like a big blob. And you're going to see when you do your activity today that this big blob will just kind of stretch out, and then all the rest of the cell is going to follow it. So if you look here, this is the main part of the amoeba. It's starting to stretch out, and then this part's going to follow it. It's something called cytoplasmic streaming. In cytoplasmic streaming, they're using their cytoplasm to actually pull them through. This is part of the phylum Sarcodyna. Remember, it goes kingdom, phylum. So this is the next smallest category of protists. You're going to see some really cool ones. Look at it when you're doing the protist virtual lab later. Look at the videos and watch them and how they move. It's kind of cool. One of my very funny jokes. Recent excitement in the microbiology lab ended abruptly when Dr. Roscoe's giant amoeba turned out to be a fried egg. They were so excited because they thought it was a giant amoeba, but it was an egg. See how it's running there? It kind of looks like cytoplasmic streaming. Here's another one. No, Elizabeth, no, don't go. They're pulling apart from each other. They're like splitting. Quarantine is depriving you all of my funny jokes. Aren't you sad? Does it make your heart sad? It should. It makes me sad that I don't get to share these jokes with you every single day. All right, next up, we have the paramecium. They're in the phyla Ciliophora. And if you guys remember, I know how much you guys like to remember Bio 1, but if you remember, when you learned about cell parts, cilia were little tiny hairs, like these little tiny hair-like appendages that were sticking off the outside of the paramecium. These are little proteins that are made into these cilia, and they can actually beat, kind of like, that's the sound they make. And when they beat like that, it can move them all around. Now in this one, you can see inside of it, you can see it has some more complex cells or complex structures. Here we've got the nucleus, down here in the macronucleus. They have food vacuoles. They will actually absorb some food from the environment and bring them in. They have contractile vacuoles, which will actually suck in water and release water so they can maintain homeostasis. They have an oral groove where they can, get some of this, sorry, dog, food inside. And look at this, they even have an anal pore so they can poop out their waste. Very exciting. Next, we have Zoomastigina. Oh, there's another joke. Now, Betty Sue, we know you're upset. Breaking up with a boyfriend is always hard. But as they say, there are more protozoa in the lower intestine. Kind of like there are more fish in the sea. Get it? I may be going slightly mad driving to this house. Oh, sorry, I was trying to move on to Zoomastigina too fast. Here is our reproduction of paramecium. Our protozoans can actually split. They can use binary fission, just like our bacteria did, where you have one, and then they split and they have two. So that is binary fission. And then here, this shows binary fission on the right, and we have conjugation on the left. In this one here, when these guys get right up next to each other, right as they're touching here, there will be an actual opening and they can exchange genetic material back and forth between the paramecium. If you guys remember, this way is asexual. And that means no variation. That's bad because you're exactly the same and you'll never get new things that could maybe help you and make you better and make you better suited for the environment. Now in conjugation over here, because we're actually switching parts, this is sexual reproduction, which means we have variation. Yay! Variation is good. So here's our Zoomastigina. These guys move with a flagella. Instead of having the cilia all over the outside, like our paramecium did, where they had that big cell and they had like those little lines all over. Kind of looks like a sun. The Zoomastigina, instead, they have this just one cilia or one flagella. This is one flagella. You can look over here, you can see one flagella. It's kind of like sperm, if you remember what sperm looked like. They had that little head on them, and then they had the little flagella. So these are actually mobile as well. They can move around utilizing that whip-like tail and get to the food sources they need. This is definitely a step up from bacteria that just had to sit there. And sporozoa, I don't have a picture of, I should put one on here, but it's just a spore. It's just kind of like a circle, and it is parasitic. It will actually live on something else and obtain nutrients. And then when it's ready, it will go off and become a functioning protozoan, and it will reproduce. Okay, our algae-like or plant-like protists What do you think that means? If they are plant-like, what are all plants? Auto what? What is it? Oh, you're right. Autotrophic. So they can use the sun's energy to make food. We cannot do this. Our protozoans cannot do this. We are not that great, but we love our algae. They actually, in the ocean, a lot of these aquatic organisms make up more of the atmospheric oxygen that we need than the plants on the rainforest. So these guys are really, really important. Their plant-like protists eventually evolved into the plants, and they are all categorized by their color. So if you look on your notes, there's all sorts of different colors. We have chlorophyta, which is green algae. It's kind of pretty, kind of slimy because it's usually in water. This is the stuff you'd see if you go to Castlewood and look in the creeks, or if you've ever walked along a river. You'd see lots of chlorophyta floating around. Our phaeophyta is kind of ugly because it's brown. Brown isn't very fun, but it is a food source for some organisms because every part of the ecosystem relies on one another. We have rhodophyta, which we're going to talk about in a minute. This is red algae. It's pretty. Christophyta, the golden brown algae. Pyrophyta, which is red-orange. That's kind of cool. Pyromaniac means fire, right? So red-orange, kind of like fire. And then finally, we have this weird one. It's weird because it's kind of a combination between the protozoans and the algae. They can photosynthesize. They do have this chloroplast here, and this chloroplast allows them to take in the sun's energy and make glucose, make food. But they also have a whip-like tail, so it's kind of tricky. They move like a protozoan, but they photosynthesize like an algae. What are you going to do? Where are you going to put it? How do you decide? Well, right now, if you remember from last time when we talked, I told you that there was only one kingdom of bacteria when I was your age, and they've now separated them as they've learned more. The same thing is happening for protists. Right now, they're all grouped together, but I think pretty soon they'll probably split this kingdom up because there's some overlap and some that don't really fit in anywhere. So let's talk about some of the goods and bads. Well, I guess we'll mostly talk about bads of our. If you look at the top of page 7, it says some protozoans are disease causing. This first one here is Plasmodium. Plasmodium causes malaria. So in that blank there at the top of your page, I want you to write malaria. You've probably heard of malaria before, but I doubt you've been infected by it. This is mostly in the tropical areas because we need this guy here, the Anopheles mosquito. The Anopheles mosquito doesn't like our weather. It gets too cold and they die off, so they wouldn't be happy here. But they actually bite somebody, and when they bite them, they inject saliva that contains this protozoan, Plasmodium, its spores. So then the spores travel down, they get into your liver, and they hang out, and then they become a parasite. They're living off of your liver. It's taking your blood, then it'll end up out here in your red blood cells, and it'll eventually make your red blood cells burst. And when that happens, all those Plasmodium cells will then go infect other red blood cells, and this cycle continues. You may not know of the side effects of malaria, but they really impact a lot of the world. If you look here, if you no longer have red blood cells because they've exploded so that the paramecium can go infect other cells and make them explode, then you're not carrying oxygen throughout your body. And every part of your body, from your head to your toes, needs oxygen. So if you look down there, look at all the malarial risk. Mexico, South America, Africa, Asia, whoa. But if you look up Northern Europe, US, Canada, Russia, not so much because of the cold. The cold kills off these mosquitoes so that they can't be so aggressive. And here are some of the effects that people have when they have this anemia caused by the exploding of red blood cells. First, we're going to have some yellowing of the eyes because the liver's not going to function well. When your liver's not functioning well, you turn yellow from the bile that's stored in there. You can get cold, pale, yellowing skin. You can have shortness of breath. Your muscles can be weak. Your spleen can enlarge. You have chest pain. You could have a heart attack, fatigue, dizziness, fainting. Now, if you were to get malaria and live in the United States, you could deal with it. We have good hospital care. We have a good medical field. But in the places where this is really bad, we've got Africa and Mexico and South America. These are places with not the most fabulous healthcare system. And millions of people die of this every year. This is a bad one. Excuse me, need more coffee. The next one at the top of the page is trypanosoma. Oof, that's a big one. But trypanosoma, what it causes in the human body, and what I want you to write on that line is African sleeping sickness. So write that up. It's on page 7 on the line. Trypanosoma is again a parasitic bug that brings this in. We have the tsetse fly now. The tsetse fly also doesn't hang out in colder climates, so we don't have a problem with this here. But it will bite a human, and it will inject this protozoan into the bloodstream. It will then reproduce by binary fission, and it will start getting into your red blood cells. Gobbles up all your red blood cells, eventually filling up your whole body with these protists that release a toxin that causes African sleeping sickness. And here are some of the traits of African sleeping sickness. You have, first of all, if it's in the blood, you might just have a fever, you might have a headache, then it will get in your lymphatic system, which is your fluid system. This is where you'll start really kind of feeling bad. Can then go to your central nervous system, cause neurological disorders, sleep disturbances, and eventually it causes you to go into a coma and then you die. In that situation, that's why it's called African sleeping sickness. Giardia, here's a fun one. Giardia is something that is found in this country. I am certain in your 15, 16 years on this planet, somebody has told you that you're not supposed to drink water out of lakes, rivers, streams. It's because of this protist right here. This guy will get into your body via contaminated water, which just about all the water in North America has this problem. And when you do, you'll get a nice old case of a raging diarrhea. And I'm not kidding this time. In Giardia, you actually ingest the cysts into your mouth. They then head off and start reproducing. Once your body gets so many of them in your digestive tract, it will actually come out in your feces, some of it. And then you pass that into the environment, gets into the water, and we're going to repeat the cycle. So your body will just have incredible amounts of diarrhea trying to get this sucker out. So under Giardia, in this case, the actual protist and the disease are called the same thing. I think actually this can be called giardiosis or something like that, but we're just going to call it Giardia. Ooh, that was a really, really bad R. Let's try that again. This one right here is supposed to be an R. Ooh, I'm not very talented on this. Here is another issue that we have with Kingdom Protista. It's kind of appropriate that I'm sitting here at the beach. You notice the background? Ooh. Sorry, because another problem that we have with Kingdom Protista is that we use fertilizers to try to make our plants grow. If your mom has a garden, or if you know anybody that has a farm, they have to put fertilizers, which onto the food to help it grow better. And then when it rains, all that fertilizer gets washed off into the river. And when that gets washed off into the river, then the algae are like, yeah, party time. They're super excited because they're getting lots and lots of nutrients that they need. And they reproduce like crazy. Look here. You guys remember a couple of years ago hearing about red tide in Florida? This toxin ended up killing so many fish, dolphin, turtles, etc., because the protozoan, or the algae, the red algae, actually releases a toxin into the water. And it probably wouldn't kill you, but smaller animals it does. And it stinks. When Florida had this problem, not only did the algae smell, but then up on the shoreline were all these dead animals that were killed by the toxin, and they started decomposing. And Florida was like a disgusting, gross stink pot for a while. My father lives in Fort Myers, and they couldn't even go to the beach. It smelled so bad. Here's some more pictures of the red tide, and then off to the right, you'll see this gross stuff that this person's scooping up. This is another algae. This is a green algae this time, and look how thick it is. That's sitting on the surface of a body of water, and who's down below that body of water? Don't you have some aquatic plants down there? You might have some fish. What are they going to do when they can't get any sunlight? They're going to die. So that big, thick algae there is very bad for the ecosystem. And then we have kingdom fungi. Oh, this could be a fun thing to do while you're quarantined. We have kingdom fungi living in our area all the time. And these right here that are on this beginning screen are called morels. A morel mushroom is a delicacy. People pay something like, I don't know, $40 a pound or something like that for these. And they grow in Missouri and in Illinois. And if you want to become a mushroom tracker, you can find these and sell them to different restaurants, and they'll pay you good money for them. They look a little creepy, but apparently they taste good. I've never had them. So kingdom fungi. A mushroom walks into a bar. Bartender says, I can't serve you. Mushroom says, well, why not? I'm a fungi. Oh, Lord. So great to be me. All right, so this is a separate kingdom, even though they kind of look like plants, if you look at them in that respect. Their biggest characteristic that separates them is they're not photosynthetic. They cannot make their own food. On number 2 there, I want you to write that they have a cell wall. Number 2, cell wall made of chitin. Chitin is a protein also found in animals that makes up animal shells, so it's a very strong protein, and they have that in their cell wall, like some animals have as their protective outer covering. And the next blank on that sheet, I want you to write not cellulose, because that's what plants have their cell wall made out of. They store their food as glycogen, like animals do. Plants store theirs as starch, which you'll see shortly. And they're heterotrophic. For a long time, fungi were placed with plants, thinking they were part of the same kingdom because they kind of all look similar. But they can't photosynthesize, so there's no way that they can be a plant. We use these things for a lot of different reasons, which we'll talk about in a minute. They can reproduce sexually or asexually. Let's look at some different types here. We have slime mold, which you'll see around sometimes in your yard, sometimes in creeks. This is pretty cool. This is called a fairy something. What was it? Yeah, fairy something type of fungus, and it's growing up right there into the grasshopper. Great thing about fungi is that they are decomposers. They can break down dead things and take those nutrients and recycle them back into the environment. Now for reproduction, they can reproduce sexually and asexually. In asexual reproduction, if you look, if I was to zoom in, this is a mushroom that you've all seen before. And if I was to do a cross section of it, I'd see these little lines here. That's what this whole mushroom is made up of. And they are called hyphae or hyphae. And they're just cell after cell after cell after cell attached to each other. And that makes up the entire first part of the mushroom. For asexual reproduction, you could just go here and cut off a little bit, put it over here now, and it would start reproducing and growing back the other parts of the cell. So it would end up eventually looking back like this again. And then we have sexual reproduction. This can occur when in that hyphae, you look, let's make this a little bigger. Right here, you can see two mating types of hyphae. And when they actually come close to each other and exchange this little appendage here, they can reproduce sexually by releasing the different gametes into the other cell. So for fungi reproduction, I want you to write cells break off. Well, it's already written down. Cells break off, form a fungus, and begin to grow in the sun. And then for this one, this is asexual reproduction possibility as well. Because right up here, if you ever look at the top of a mushroom cap, they have these little gills, they call it, all along the top. They just kind of go choo, 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 choo. That's how they sound. Inside of each of those, there are spores. There are little organisms wanting to become something new. These spores can then, how many of you, because I've seen my kids do it, I bet you do it too. How many, if you're in the yard and you see a mushroom or some other kind of fungus, you kick it? Anybody? If you do that, what you're doing is kicking all the seeds that are in here in the gills, and you're gonna have tons and tons more fungi in your yard. So in number 2, I want you to write in the gills of the mushroom, there are spores which can fly off and make a new organism. Nobody added any other genetic material there. You just had a mushroom that has gills with spores inside. That's an example of asexual reproduction. So let's talk about the good and bad here. Negative aspects of kingdom fungi. There's lots of, we call it diseases, but it's more like conditions. Most of these are not going to kill you. Where did my mouse go? Do, 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 do. I'm having serious problems with my mouse today. I'm gonna have to get a new one. Hope you can be patient while I find my mouse. I don't know what it is now. Ha. Here's another reproduction on fungi. If you've ever kept bread too long, I'm sure you've seen this kind of fungus before. This type of fungus grows right on the plants. It has spores on the top of them. If you were to blow that, you would shoot them everywhere. They also have these hyphae, where the hyphae could come together, exchange parts, and have sexual reproduction. This was an old coworker of mine. She was unmarried and had no children, lived by herself, and she left a bowl of tomato soup out on the counter. And look what became all these different colors. Those are all different species of fungus. Here are some human pathogens and some plant pathogens of fungus. Athlete's foot. Now that is a really, really bad case of athlete's foot because I had to find something disgusting. But all it is a fungus. Your feet are moist as they're in socks because they get a little sweaty. And fungus love warm, moist places. So if you walk around a locker room or you walk around a public restroom without shoes on, you might pick up some of these fungi that love to grow on your feet, and it'll cause a mild irritation. You just get some spray and it goes away. No big deal. On the right here, we have plant rust. This is a fungus that can impact plants. This is one of the reasons why we have to use herbicides and different types of treatments on plants so that our plants don't get destroyed by these different types of mildew or fungus that can attach to our plants. Here we have ringworm, again, a really bad case of ringworm because that's just how I am. But when people first saw it, they're like, dude, that looks like a worm. And it's in a circle, so they called it ringworm. But it's not a worm. It is a fungus, and all you have to do is get antifungal cream and it'll go away. Everybody gets ringworm at some point in their life. You can pick it up from different people. If you're a wrestler, it tends to pass around a lot, a gymnast, or you can even pick it up from your dog. Now this one is one that is avoidable, toenail fungus. If you go somewhere to get your toes done or your nails done, one of these salons, make sure you're going to a place that's reputable. Because there are some places in town, they will cut your nails or file your nails or do the cuticle thing, whatever they want to do. And then they'll use those exact same tools on the next person. And that is passing what is called toenail fungus around the pedicure community. What happens is this fungus gets underneath your toenail, and your toenail, instead of being flat, will continue to get thicker and thicker and thicker. And since it's under your nail, you can't just use an ointment because it can't get through your nail. So they either have to take a needle and put that needle down underneath your skin to get rid of the fungus, or one of my friends had to take a medication to get rid of it, and it made her lose her sense of taste. Craziness. Positive aspects of fungus, number one, I want you to write they're decomposers. They break down dead stuff. If it wasn't for the decomposers, the fungi, we would have dead stuff everywhere. It'd be stinky and gross. Number two, food source for animals. We eat fungus. We eat algae. We eat mushrooms. We eat all sorts of the fungus community. Genetic engineering, they use yeast in a lot of genetic engineering experiments, and they use yeast actually to make our food. We make our bread with yeast. We'll make lots of different things with fungi. And then finally, number five, they possess natural chemicals that fight bacterial pathogens. I want you to write antibiotics on that line there. So back in the day, Alexander Fleming was kind of being a slacker of a scientist. He was working in his lab growing bacteria, and he left an orange out. Eating in the lab. Anyway, he went on an out-of-town vacation, or maybe it was just a weekend, I'm not sure. But when he returned, his orange was covered in mold. And some of the mold, a spore, had actually flown off and flown into our friend Alexander Fleming's petri dish. If you look at this petri dish, all these little dots on here, does anybody know what they are? Well, we just did this, right? Dot, 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 dot. Those are all bacteria. And if you look in this whole region here, none of the bacteria wanted to grow there. There's some white spots, but that's just bad picture. No bacteria wanted to grow there because that fungus is releasing an antibiotic, which destroys this cell wall of our bacteria. So this was that zone of inhibition that you guys did last time. If it wasn't for Alexander Fleming stupidly leaving his orange out, we may have never figured out antibiotics. And then back over here, she's a bacteria, he's a fungus. And she says, I don't care if he's penicillin, we're in love. What did I just tell you that penicillin does to bacteria? If she keeps up with that attitude, she's gonna be dead. Ha 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 ha. And then our final type of fungi is something called lichens. Remember, CH makes a K sound in Latin. So lichens are really important fungi. They can actually break down rock. They can break down rock into more of a dirt-like product. So if we have something like a major volcano erupts, lichen can come in and start breaking down that rock and building the ecosystem back up. I bet you never realized how cool fungus were and protists, but you do now. So for regular bio, I want you, well, all of you, I want you to do the Protist virtual lab. And for honors, you're going to do another little reading too. It's going to be super fun. They're both going to be turned in to the assignments on Google Classroom. Again, I'm going to show you, I don't know how many times I'm going to show this to you. I'm going to show it to you a lot. But when you open that assignment, here we go, way up at the top. Here is a link, and I have to hit Control and open to open it in. Over here. Oh, that's why. Hold on. Winter, I'm on ink. It doesn't like to do that. Let's try again. So when I open this, I have Adobe Flash Player is blocked because everything cool made in science was Adobe Flash Player. And now Adobe and Google are fighting like 2-year-olds, and we can't use that anymore. But we can still use it for now. So I want you to go to this eye that has a circle in it. I want you to right click on it, or if you have a Chromebook, click on your pad with 2 fingers. Come down to where it says Flash and hit allow. And now, look, it's there. It says to apply your updates, reload this page. So you reload it and everything is there. Yay. Good luck, get that done. Please send me an email or send me a message on Remind if you're having a lot of trouble with this technology thing. I'm not trying to stress you out. And it only took me 6 tries to get that stupid 8-minute video out last night. So I understand that it takes a little figuring out here at first. Hopefully we'll become real good at it in the next couple weeks. We did talk today, for those of you that weren't there, about timing and what is a good time for everybody to meet with all your other teachers meeting. And we came up with that for Bio 3, we're going to meet Tuesday and Thursday at 2 o'clock. It's a good opportunity to ask any questions you might have, to get some help, and I will post the video as well. I hope you have a great day. Get outside, get some fresh air, be kind to your siblings, help your mom. Everybody's going crazy right now because we're sick of this, but you've got to be patient. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Don't play too much Xbox. Don't play too much TikTok. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.